But all I'm really seeing is collectivism. You know, in the New Age movement, there's this collectivism, constant collectivism, ashrams, getting together, you know, hugging, and all this stuff that I'm not like really not into. And then, as I said, this sort of core charlatanism, this label reading aspect, you know, and Socrates would have called it, you know, this idea that you talk to one guy and he thinks he's an expert on everything just because, okay, he specializes in making chairs, he's an expert on every other subject under the sun. So I would find this in that New Age movement, that there's a lot of people here, because they have a certain amount of knowledge about one thing, they now are like, you know, label readers, and they'll try to pretend to you that they really are experts on everything else. I find this sort of intellectual arrogance, and I have a meter for that. I don't like it. I don't like it in academic circles. When I grew up in Ireland with my dad and his people, and I didn't like it when I, you know, moved to America and was in the center of all of this. And one of, I think, the other reasons why I didn't like it, I guess that's it really, is because, well, I don't know, I saw this schism or dichotomy, you know, between what people were saying and writing and the way their own lives were. Then, of course, I just got influenced by other people that were not even remotely connected to it. And I like that. I like that bohemian quality where these people weren't pretentious. They're just ordinary people, but they had extraordinary knowledge. So I started leaning more towards that, you know. But again, I would say that Edgar Casey, you know, who's a great seer, great prophet.
Uh-huh.
He might be one of the, you know, the foundations of it. Certainly, Reverend Paul Solomon. His organization was connected to the Wrekin Trust of England, which was run by Sir George Trevelyan, who was a personal friend of ours. He was another person we knew in our family, and a very lovely man. You know, and so, oh yeah, I remember what the other reason was. The other reason why I didn't really like it in the end of the day is I just didn't buy into their ideology. I literally didn't really buy into it. Mm-hmm. And don't forget that the New Age movement, even though it's founded in America, or it's sort of apparently Western, you must know, of course, that it's mostly based on Eastern philosophies, ultimately. In other words, the Eastern religions and Eastern practices very much infuse, as you well know, you know, the yogas, the meditation styles, the beads and the robes and the ash on the forehead and the mushrooms and the, you know, all the palava and the namastes and all of this other garbage, you know. It just seemed too packaged, too sort of Eastern, and I have huge problems with that. I haven't spoken on it a lot, but I have major problems with all forms of Eastern religion. I don't, you know, maybe we don't have time to go into it, but I have serious problems with all forms of Oriental religions deeply. And so the New Age movement is knee deep in that. You only have to go into any New Age bookstore over there in America. You only have to hang around any of these loony cults. You know, I won't go so far as to mention any names, but I was affiliated with many, many of them. And this kind of also was not something I was interested in.
Huh. We have a couple questions from the chat room. Guys, I'm writing everything down here, and we're going to get to them later in the broadcast. We are speaking with Michael Tsarion. His website is michaeltsarion.com and Architects of Control. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
You ever heard that phrase, everyone knows that, mate? Well, why does everyone know that? Well, it's because this system is controlled by what I call repeaters. They're people in the situations of power and influence who just repeat what someone else tells them. A doctor is repeating what they were told at medical school and what the drug companies tell them. You've got teachers who repeat what they learned in their exams or what they learned at teacher training college, and they repeat that to the next generation. And the great repeaters are what pass for journalists. This is that area outside Parliament where they stand there doing their pieces to camera telling people what's going on. Here we have the crews waiting for the journalists to come across from Westminster and stand there and tell them what's happening in the world. The fact is they don't know what's happening. They know nothing. So this is what they should be saying if they were telling the truth. Now over to Westminster for the latest news from David Icke. Thank you, you. Well, I haven't got a clue what's going on. I tell you what my job is, right? I wear a dark suit, not normally, but you know, I'm playing here. And I'm come over from there and I tell you what they told me is going on. And I deliver it as if I know what's going on and it's really true. I've got a clue if it's true. But They tell me, and they wouldn't lie, would they? Would Tony Blair lie about what's really happening? Would George Bush, please? I'm a journalist, trust me. And so, what we call news, what you get paid a lot of money for reading AutoQ about, is merely propaganda that they have told me and I tell you. David Icke, BBC, ITN, CNN, CBS, Sky News, Westminster.
Problem, reaction, solution, revolution. You can only push the people so far till they reach their own conclusions.
And welcome back to Truth Frequency. We are speaking with Michael Tsarion, and we were talking about Helena Blavatsky, the New Age movement, and how things came to be where they are. I mean, my personal views on everything is that the truth is not going to be packaged in one little book. You have to look everywhere and draw the truth out from every source that you come across. I mean, would you agree with that?
Of course. I mean, that's mythology teaches us this. The god of knowledge was Mercury, and he had the ability, he was the only god who had the ability to go between Hades and hell. All doors were open to him, all hallways, you know, the gods and the goddesses would all have to accept Mercury. And that's a metaphor for the mind of man. There should be no place that he disallows himself to go, because ultimately the last frontiers of the world are mental. And all real change is also mental. And you're not going, you know, you can't live in a one-seasoned world. Nature won't allow it, and we're doing it, and that's why that's why we're experiencing all these meltdowns. That's why we're experiencing the kind of disenchantment that we're seeing right now, is because man wants to live mentally and psychologically in a one-seasoned world, and that goes against, you know, the ways of nature. It goes against his better nature, his inner nature. So yeah, when it comes to knowledge, people have to be prepared to have all the seasons and all the flavors in order to really find out what's going on.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let me pose one of the questions from the chat room to you. Hold on, I've got them written down here. Somebody wants to know if you're doing any presentations in America.
Yeah, Brian Hall has actually invited me to speak at Conspiracy Con in June, so we'll be there. And that's about the only one I know is planned right now. There's several others in the works, but that one is the one I know about.
Okay. And do you have any comments on somebody named Freeman? I'm not sure who that is, but from the Freeman perspective, because I've heard Michael say a few I can't read this, what this guy wrote. Do you have anything to say about the Freeman perspective?
No.
No. Okay. I can't tell what he was trying to write in that question. All right, back to Blavatsky. What else can you tell us about her?
Well, let me just mention that Brian Hall's website is conspiracycon.com. They can go there for more information on that. Conspiracycon.com, just in case they are interested. And what was the question again?
Well, if you have anything else to add about Blavatsky.
Well, I've got a few questions about Blavatsky. Did the British set her up to look like a fraud, so that they could kind of steal her ideas, or because apparently whenever she and Occult got together, while she was out of town, her own people set her up to make her look like a fraud.
Yeah, this has happened a lot. This has happened with other people, like Osho, for instance. This has happened where they become either completely freaky and disassociated, or they actually do use a legitimate organization and then they bring it under their own power. Because remember, this particular Black Lodge is very sophisticated, but it also doesn't have a lot of power or time to be creating a lot of its own orders for the public. So what they might do, when they saw that Theosophy was catching on, and when they saw that it was attracting a lot of elites and a lot of intellectuals, and it was really, you know, ready to shake the world, they have multiple reasons of why they want to undermine it. Because these are, as I've said before, these royal figures, the ones at the top, they are actually the ones holding civilization back. The politicians, the people that we see, these royal figures, if we didn't have them, they're like the poison in the blood. They actually hold society back. And one of the ways that they've done this is by sabotaging legitimate people, legitimate organizations that may start with the best motives, and then they get in there, you see, and try to subvert it. This is well known. They either try to do that through black propaganda, which is what you're talking about, or they'll literally do it by physically poisoning or taking out the leaders, which they've done. And they do this on all sorts of levels. And that's what I believe personally did happen to Theosophy. They